Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
A new fantastic point of view. No one to tell us no, or where to go, or say we're only.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalies podcast, episode 89. We were slated to have a guest this week, but spoiler, we don't. We had a last minute change in plans, so that led to a first on this podcast. We're not at unnamed bar in Roseville or St. Paul. We're in my home this time because my roommates are gone, so I don't have to worry about them jumping in on this podcast.
I was going to say it smells like soccer scarves and craft beer, but I didn't want to insult you or anything.
Actually, I don't think we have any craft beer right now.
What?
We have plenty of craft liquor. But
close enough.
The only beer we have in the fridge right now is Molson.
Oh.
Canadian.
Well, I mean,
so,
yeah.
there you go. There's your free advertising.
It's
for
Canadian.
The week. Yeah. So, no,
you can take Giles out of Reeds, but you can't take the Reeds out of Giles.
You didn't answer my snap on Friday night.
I didn't?
No.
Oh, yeah. I didn't remember that. I didn't get it until the next morning, so
okay.
I was
That
thoroughly...
makes
Yeah.
sense.
I didn't even recognize who was the other guy. I didn't even recognize.
I don't know. Somebody was standing next to Tom, and a couple of guys were, and they're all suited up, and I was convinced they were affiliated with Tampa Bay somehow, but I couldn't quite figure out who they were, but I could be wrong.
Oh.
I'm usually wrong. Beer was had, so I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, if I would have recognized who they were, I would have, been able to add to the conversation. But.
The effect of the snap was just adding to the who's paid Tom Reed more discussion we had a few weeks ago. But, all right, I think we probably have a lot to talk about anyway, so we're gonna jump right into it because I have many things to say about hockey this week. Yeah, there's
fair enough.
There's a lot.
Okay.
So
it was 4 games, so
there's a lot of crap in there. So the Wild played Winnipeg on Tuesday, and in the 2 days before, it had gotten out that Bruce Boudreau, almost stumbled with that. He said he was going to start Dubnyk on Tuesday because he liked how Winnipeg's top 6 was and how quick they are, and they're one of the more effective top 6s in the league.
Sure.
They don't have a lot of depth behind that, but
right.
You really can't go wrong with their top 6. So he decided to throw Dubnyk in there Tuesday night just to bail the Wild out after a couple of days off, and lo and behold, he was right. Go figure, a guy who's won 8 division titles in 9 years was right about something. The Wild won 4-2, but seemingly the last half of the game and whatnot was very one-sided in favor of Winnipeg. But Dubnyk bailed out the team, and as I try to bring up the stats on the fly here, because why would I have that handy at all?
Yeah, I think, and we can get more into the decision as far as it relates to Chicago versus Winnipeg, but something that, spurned by the infamous Jeremy Roenick tweet, Greg Wyshynski of Yahoo also noted that Darcy Kemper's numbers against Winnipeg are awful. Yeah. They're awful. I mean, he's like got an 880 save percentage or something to that effect. And as you noted, and he also noted, you noted it earlier in the day, and Wyshynski reposted the same stats, Darcy Kemper very good against Chicago. For whatever reason, in a game plus action, or almost 2 games worth of action.
Not a whole lot, but
right,
it was good.
Yeah, small sample size, but better, much better than his results against Winnipeg. And, as you mentioned, Winnipeg has some scoring. I mean, they're maybe not Chicago in the terms of name recognition, but guys like Laine, obviously he's having a phenomenal year. He's incredibly talented. You could argue almost as talented as Patrick Kane. Mark Scheifele, very, very underrated, having a better year than Jonathan Toews, certainly. Insert all-star game joke here. So, it made a lot of sense. And you're going for Dubnyk against Winnipeg. You want to guarantee a win. And then you see how you match up against Chicago on Tuesday. Because, as good as the Wild are, obviously Chicago is still very much the team to beat in the Central, it feels like. And even though Chicago kind of played the reverse card on that, you still want to see how you match up. And if Kemper's at his best, if he's at his best, which is rare, but if he's at his best, he's as good as Dubnyk. Right. He's just not at his best very often. So, that's kind of, I think I totally understand the thought process. And obviously Boudreau explained it at length, and poor Russo had to tell people to read his blog at length because he kept getting asked the same question. And Jeremy Roenick still can't wrap his mind around it to this day. Wow. Which, there's a lot of reasons for that, concussions notwithstanding. But, it made sense to me, and it made sense, I think, to a lot of people. So I don't see what the big deal is.
Well, I guess since we'll jump right over to Chicago on Wednesday night. Boy. Everyone was so appalled that Mike Milbury said, the Wild were cocky for putting Kemper out there. And then Roenick has his tweet storm, and then he starts going at it with a local radio host.
Oh my God! Is there a worse Twitter conversation on the face of the freaking earth than JR? Let's just call him JR. Let's just call him JR and PA. Yeah. Good God. My friend tweeted something more like, "Oh, I love this exchange," or "Is there anything better than this tweet exchange between JR and PA?" And I tweeted him back, "How about murder suicide?" Obviously,
So, well, here's my problem.
Hyperbole, but
and I tweeted this right after Milbury went on his rant. But it is amazing that somebody pays Mike Milbury actual dollars to talk hockey
probably
on television.
Yeah,
and people take what he says seriously. I stopped listening to him long ago, so I wasn't violently upset by what he said because I don't care.
Yeah.
It stinks because this is probably one of the first times the Wild have really been kind of on the spotlight on NBC this year. And
rivalry night.
This is what we got for analysis. And then, Roenick just seemingly getting yapped at by every Wild fan, so you can take what you want. He's in the same boat. I don't even follow him on Twitter.
No, I don't either.
It got retweeted into my feed, so that's how I found his stuff. But I don't know. Russo had a good rant about this and how little research was done on the Wild and how it had been said so many times why Kemper was starting Wednesday night. And did he play okay? Sure. I wasn't upset with how he played, but if Dubnyk had been in, it probably turns into a Wild win. But
sure. But then it's the same thing, and like we said, if you flip it,
right,
it's the same results. Right. Essentially, I mean, okay, so maybe you beat Chicago, maybe,
but they don't.
There's no guarantee to that. Maybe you beat Chicago. But maybe you don't beat Winnipeg. Maybe you get an overtime loss. Maybe you get a regulation loss against Winnipeg. Because Kemper is not good against Winnipeg, and that's all there is to it. So, at the end of the day, you got 3 out of 4 points. And had you flipped it, maybe you get 3 out of 4 points. I don't think you get 4 out of 4 points. Maybe you only get 2 points. I don't know.
They got 3 out of 4, which that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not mad about that, and I think there was a little bit too much of the doom and gloom after the OT loss to Chicago.
I don't know why.
Apparently people forgot the standings, and I like the Wild's chances in, say, a 5-on-5 overtime format somewhere down the line. But I think the other thing that kind of bothered me was that the Milbury and Roenick remarks kind of took away from what was a pretty fantastic hockey game.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't the best officiated hockey game, but I thought the play was fantastic for a early February game between two rivals, if we want to call them that. But I think that kind of got lost in the overblown reaction to NBC.
Yeah. No, I would agree. That game might have been the most fun game that we've seen all season. And in terms of intensity, in terms of importance, that game was up there quite a bit. I mean, that game was up there with the Columbus game, I think. As far as and the game itself was much, much better. I mean, the Columbus game was a yawner, or at least for the first half, for sure. And yeah, sure, it was ballyhooed and much hyped, but it was still a game in late December between two teams, two franchises that nobody cares about. But yeah, I think that was a fantastic game, and it really did take away. I mean, the Wild stood toe to toe with the Blackhawks, and narrowly lost to them late in overtime with their backup goaltender, and obviously, like you said, the story became the backup goaltender, which is stupid. But you're on the second half of a back-to-back with travel. It wasn't like it was a home-and-home back-to-back. And then granted, the travel from Winnipeg isn't much, but it's still travel. After a long, long road trip, no less. So your first game home after an 8-game or whatever, 7-game road trip.
Right.
And, yeah, I was very encouraged by that game. I mean, the Blackhawks are still the team to beat in this division. And until the Wild win the division, that's how you have to see it. And so going toe-to-toe with them and taking them to the very brink of overtime, granted needing to use your backup goaltender isn't ideal, but it is what it is. Like, it's just kind of...
The Wild had 2, I believe, chances in overtime to win right away, and then that's just one of those cases where they had a golden chances to win and they don't, and you usually see it in hockey where it comes down the other way and the other team wins, and maybe it was a little delayed because of a penalty to Suter that you can maybe argue that shouldn't have been for something that happened 10 seconds earlier.
Well,
I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah. Do you want to get into the offsides challenge?
Oh yeah.
The offsides challenge that literally took, I think somebody timed it at 6.5 minutes. It's just Jesus Christ.
First of all, kudos to whoever timed it, because I certainly wouldn't have been expecting more than a minute or two to look at it, and whatever. I don't know. I felt it could go the opposite way.
Oh yeah,
but
that's what everyone thought.
Remember this as one of the rare times a Minnesota sports team was gifted something by an official. And they got that gift, sure, but that kind of sucked the life right out of the momentum they had built in that period where they were just steamrolling.
Yeah, I mean
Chicago. It wasn't even close.
No, they were really buzzing at that point in time, and afterwards, I think they still had decent pressure after that goal, I guess was called. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same at all. And so, not to say that it would have continued definitely after the goal anyway, but still, it still kind of sucked the energy out. And they were gifted a goal, I guess you could say. I mean, the NHL still stands by the idea that play was good, contrary to what every video replay showed. But it is what it is. And, take it. You got to have goals like that. Sometimes you got to have a little bit of luck go your way, and the Wild basically secured an extra point out of the deal because of it. So, whatever. I mean, maybe if that goal is waved off, maybe something completely different happens. Sports isn't played in a vacuum, so it's impossible to tell. But
so I think that pulled Chicago to 5 points.
Yep,
5 points of the Wild.
Yep,
and it's still a pretty comfortable spot to be in with a couple games in hand, and the bye weeks coming up for both teams I think at different times, but anyway. So Boudreau decided to give the Wild Thursday off because they played a lot of games lately, so he felt they could use a rest, and that kind of carried into Friday night's game.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because it was kind of a snooze fest. I mean, I hate saying that about a hockey game, but the game was pretty lacking in just decent flow. And oh my,
Gee, the Avs
sorry
gooning.
we have the Islanders and Avalanche on in the background here as we record, just because it adds something to the show, and I can watch Colorado lose as we record. So,
Blake Como's gooning it up. Surprise, surprise.
Where's $3.5 million man Cal Clutterbuck? Where's he at?
I don't know. I think he's on the bench where he should be.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so I think it was 2-1. The Wild won in a shootout.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That was, it was getting to be a little bit painful to watch, just for a game flow perspective, when you just decide to flip it over to the Gopher game for a little bit. And then Wild winning the shootout on a patented Koivu forehand, backhand.
Well, but the interesting thing to me is that he added a wrinkle to it. He came in from the other side, and so he didn't do the classic, because he's a left-handed shot. He didn't come in from the left, essentially, and go across the goalie from the goalie's perspective, right to left. He came in on the goalie's left and kind of faked a little bit of a forehand shot, and then flipped it, with at more of a 45-degree angle, I guess you could say, more of an angle in, but still faked that forehand and went backhand, but just kind of came in from the complete opposite side. So it was interesting. It was kind of fun to see that. Obviously, the only goal scored in the shootout, which I don't know. I guess if you're going to have an abomination of a shootout, you might as well have it be exciting in that regard. I mean, they're always kind of exciting, but
I could be wrong here. I don't think Dubnyk actually had to make a save in the shootout.
No, they shot him all wide.
Shot him wide.
Yeah, they all three shots
every
from
time
Tampa went wide.
I was terrified because the Lightning tossed out some pretty good shooters in the shootout.
Yeah.
I think it was Druin, Kucherov, and I can't remember the last one.
The kid that scored the goal. Was it in Point?
Yes.
Yeah, he was in too. And that was the night that Zach Parise just could not buy a goal.
Right.
That was... it's tough to say because you see so much of this out of Parise. You see him, the workman's effort. You see him, running at 110% all the time. But that game really was... I don't know how long if it'll stand out to me for a long time, but at least on that night, it stood out to me as the quintessential Zach Parise game. Without him scoring, of course. But, he was everywhere. He was absolutely everywhere, especially late in the game. And then in overtime as well, I feel like he had a really good chance, or even two, I think, even. And then obviously in the shootout, same thing. He just barely botches a move that he was trying, and credit to Andrei Vasilevsky, who's a very good goalie. It's tough to score low on a goalie that's that tall, quite frankly. He's got a lot of legs to throw out there. So,
and that was a game that Tampa Bay was kind of big on. John Cooper said before the game that they were going to use this as kind of a measuring stick for where they're at.
Sure,
they're playing, one of the best teams in the league, and
which is weird to hear him say. It's weird to think of that as like the Wild are a litmus test for other teams. Like that's it's really, really bizarre.
That really shows how bad things are going for Tampa Bay, is when they have to say about somebody else that, the team we're playing, this is a good test, see where we're at. And I still hold out this vague hope that Tampa Bay kind of turns it around and they're just going to go. But as we just keep going and going, I'm just slightly less convinced every day that that's going to be a thing.
Well, they've been without Steven Stamkos for how long? That's just kind of you take one of the best players in the game off that team, and that's just it's going to derail you quite a bit. So
the good news is they're only 5 points out of a playoff spot as we record here, so they can certainly get it going. But boy. Other thing I want to point out from Tampa Bay before we move on was the lone wild goal not in the shootout was from Niederreiter on the power play. His 7th power play goal of the season. Would you care to take a venture at how many power play goals he had in his career before the season total?
It was definitely less than 7. Jeez. I'm going to say 3.
He had 2 in 2015-16, but as a total in his career, he had 10.
Oh.
He had 6 in 2014-15.
Okay.
Which I would have never guessed that.
I never would have either. How the hell did that happen?
But so he had 10 in his career previously, and then he's at 7 this year.
Okay.
So you'd like to think that, barring unforeseen circumstances, he would be able to eclipse that at some point.
Double his career power play goals.
That 7 easily leads the team, and I'm not even sure who's second on this team in power play goals.
I don't know.
I'm trying to look this up on the fly because I had Niederreiter's stats.
Yeah, it's not Zucker because he doesn't have a lot of power play time. It might be Granlund.
Readily available.
I don't know that it's Coyle, though, either. Coyle hasn't spent a ton of time in the power play either, I don't feel like.
What does this tell me? I don't know. Anyway.
There's not many, though. It's been Niederreiter. That's kind of been hands down. Could be Staal, too.
Oh, Staal has been very not good lately. And
True.
I don't know if it's alarming, but I think it's just been kind of covered up by Koivu's continued good play, and Hull has had a couple of nice games here recently, and they're kind of starting to shuffle Coyle back into the center slot, so to maybe try to cover that up. But I don't know. I'm not ready to say we should be worried yet, but if this continues for a while, then maybe we should be worried.
Right, and this just gives further credence to, and not to say to completely go off on myself or anything, but a lot of people talking about, well, you got to protect Staal. You got to protect Staal in this expansion draft. You got to protect Staal. And I'm not basing that off of. I'm not basing this what I'm about to say off of the past 2 weeks or whatever where he's really struggled. But I've always been, even when he was doing great, even when he was on pace for 70 points, I was saying,
expose him.
Yeah. He's 32. I mean, especially with the seasons that Granlund and Zucker are having.
Right.
And those guys are what, 26? 25, 26, I think?
Granlund is 24 and Zucker is 25.
Okay, so 24, 25.
You don't
expose Eric Staal. If Vegas takes Eric Staal, no matter what, they're doing the Wild a huge favor.
Right.
Huge. I mean, yes, he has a favorable contract. Yes, he was off to an incredible start to the season, and I fully expect him to bounce back. I don't expect the struggles to continue. I'm not saying expose him because he's had a bad 2 weeks. I've been saying it all season. Expose him. If Vegas takes him, that's their. I mean, not to say that it would be the worst pick in expansion draft history, and maybe it makes a little bit of sense to have a veteran center on that team, especially at a bargain, because they can turn around and deal them, especially. But you're building an NHL franchise. Do you want, a 21-year-old Matt Dumba or a 2 or 3-year-old Jonas Brodin,
right,
or do you want a 32-year-old Eric Staal, who, we'll see how his season ends up, but he's coming off a bunch of piss poor seasons. If he has a good year this year, it'll be his first good year in 3 seasons or so. So expose him. It's just, it makes too much sense not to. And obviously they're going to, same thing goes for Zucker and Granlund right now too. They're going to go after guys like that.
Yeah. Vegas, from what I've kind of gathered, it sounds like Vegas is definitely going to look to go young and be a team of the future, as they should.
As they should, yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you probably want them to have success right away, but they want to go long-term success so they can continue to have that fan base after a while. You don't want to trade, success down the road for short-term success here in the first couple of years. But.
And it's not like for them taking from Vegas' standpoint. Put yourself in Vegas' shoes. You take
dangerous.
You've already got a beer. I don't know how many you've had today, but you're taking a Brodin or you're taking a Dumba over an Eric Staal. Are you really losing that much talent in that? Like, are you really losing that much win now? No, you're not. You can make a pretty decent argument that either one of those players is better right now than Eric Staal. Also, hey, by the way, 10 years younger.
Right.
So it just this whole. I mean, again, not to say that I told you so, or not to say that this is based on the last 2 weeks, but expose Eric Staal. It's not. You're not going to regret exposing Eric Staal. And along with my article this week, don't count on Pominville waiving his no movement clause. It's just, I'm sorry, don't count on it. It's just not going. It's not going to happen.
That's just a question that I just see every week, and
it's weird.
Also, this is something I kind of get bothered with. I don't get too worked up about expansion right now. Like, obviously, it's there in the back of my mind, but I don't get too worked up about it right now because it's still mid-February.
Yeah.
There's still a long way to go until then. You know, and I'd like to think we were going to have a nice playoff run to kind of make me forget about it, but I'm an eternal optimist.
Well, and it is in the back of everyone's mind, especially with the trade deadline looming, because we're going to see quite frankly, we're going to see some goofy deals at the trade deadline. Not necessarily involving the Wild, and I really doubt we're going to see anything big from the Wild, from what it sounds like.
I have a problem believing, it was thrown out there this week that Scandella might be somebody they'd look to move, but I just have a problem thinking they'd move any blue liners, and it adds to it when they're bringing up guys like Tuck and Olofsson and Riley to kind of see what they have in case they do want to make some kind of move, but I don't know. Boudreau has kind of said, hey, maybe we should really look at doing much of anything just because you don't want to mess with chemistry. And, when you've won 37 out of 55 games on the season, you probably don't really want to mess with chemistry. And you really only look at just trying to add, just a depth guy or two just for injury's sake. But... and then maybe that's why they also looked at, Tuck as, hey, if somebody gets hurt at the forward, we could call him up and he could be that guy instead of trading for somebody. So,
and I think we saw out of Tuck what we kind of expected. I think we saw some good play out of him. I think we saw some bad play out of him. And same thing with Riley. I mean, we saw some great stuff out of Riley. We saw that absolute laser from the faceoff dot. And we saw some pretty nasty turnovers from Riley too, which you kind of expect. And so, I still think they're going to make a deadline deal. But again, I think we talked about this last week too. It's not going to be a big one.
No,
it's going to be a fourth line type, a guy. It's going to be a guy that is a fourth line type now, and you're not completely mortified when he has to play in the third line because of an injury. It's going to be that type of guy. It's going to be a Jordan Schrader type of guy. It's going to be an Eric Halla, I guess you could say, type of guy where it's like, maybe he's. If your team is really good, he's on the fourth line. But if he's on the third line, you're really not that upset about it. I guess you could maybe the Cody McCormick type. You can maybe make an argument. I don't know that he's exactly that type of guy, but something to that effect. And that's all I really see them doing. I don't think they do a whole lot of expansion draft dodging with the trade deadline. They already did that with signing Alex Staal. They're kind of set. They're gonna. I mean, one way or another, they're gonna lose a defenseman. If they don't, they lose a young forward for foolish reasons. Should they decide to protect Eric Staal, but that's about it. That's all there is to it.
And to answer my question earlier, the second most power play goals on the team is Coyle with 4.
Okay, 4. That's it.
And then there's 3 guys with 3, and so on.
I suppose Coyle has played enough power play time. I don't think of him as a power play much. But
it feels like he stacked all those up really early in the season.
Yeah, probably right.
He's been, like Staal, he's been kind of struggling for a while.
Yeah. Until they moved him into center.
Until
in Winnipeg.
Today, when he had a lovely goal against the Red Wings.
Yeah, I don't know that lovely even fully describes it. I mean, holy Christ, was that a sweet goal. That was beautiful.
I forgot the way to find the Big Omelet GIF on my phone. It had been a while.
Fair.
This is where it is.
Yeah.
But no, so the last game of the week here was Sunday afternoon, and I am fully in favor of, Sunday or Saturday afternoon games.
Sure.
Players are not. I think we've talked about this before, but they had Detroit come to St. Paul on Star Sunday. But regrettably, the star for Detroit wasn't Tom Vanek, and he ended up not even getting in the lineup because he was out with, I forget what it was, lower body injury?
Ankle. He hurt his ankle yesterday.
Okay.
Because they were in a back-to-back.
They played last night. He had a nice goal. I was watching some highlights this morning. He had a nice goal last night. But
how did he score that if he can't skate?
I'm just waiting for my roommate to just come out of nowhere and vanish out of thin air.
He's just going to appear next to me. He can't skate. He can't skate.
He just appears from behind the soccer scarves.
Oh, that would be a tremendous gimmick for him.
You can't tell, but his it's just soccer scarves.
Yeah.
Just on the outside.
I'm surrounded by a wall of soccer scarves here.
It's good, though. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a nice touch.
But I live here, so...
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Anyway, Wild, they got off to a good start. A couple of power play goals in the first period by Granlund, Niederreiter. And then the two teams kind of just traded goals.
Really, very much traded goals, yeah.
It was pretty quick. And then in the middle there was the highlight reel by Coyle. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to look that up, and because that was jaw dropping worthy.
Yeah.
If you might see it make its way onto SportsCenter, but hopefully somebody pays attention to the hockey over there. But anyway.
Yeah, the way that he turned that defenseman around was absolutely. I mean, that was, the actual move to score on the goalie itself was entertaining, but the move around the defenseman was arguably even better because he gets a stretch pass that kind of wobbles a little bit and he can't handle it, and he just kind of taps it, and it gets caught kind of just behind the defenseman legs. He reaches around the defenseman, taps it further up ice, and kind of just blows right by the defender, goes around him. And then obviously puts a nifty little backhand forehand move on the goalie. And as the Avs are scored
They're
on
so bad.
yet again, my God, are the Avalanche bad.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, well.
Pickard,
Pickard
didn't
even
even
try.
Yeah, it was
just
a weird goal.
I guess that serves me right. I said a nice
Lots
thing
and lots of crowd chant going on tonight in Brooklyn.
Oh, look, there's the SUV and the glass bank.
Wait, is that? Oh, no, it's an SUV. No, it's a pickup.
What?
Oh, it's a crew cab pickup. I don't even know what to think anymore.
What? How do they get it out of there?
Did they drive that around on the ice at any point, I wonder? That would be kind of fun.
I don't know. I'm probably not going to make my way out to see an Islanders game anytime
You're not going to see a game in Brooklyn before they shut the door on that whole experience?
If I went to, New York to see a game, I'd go to MSG. And then I would purposefully not go see the Islanders wherever they are.
I want to be at the last hockey game at Barclays, and just pretend that it's really, really sad. Just like they did at the Coliseum. Pretend like it's that, only it was a 3-year run at the Barclays. Just be like, oh my God, there's so many great memories of this building.
So many memories, so many banners hung here. Oh, they're doing the wave. Oh, they're so bored.
Oh, God. That off-center scoreboard, and
such a respectable fan base.
All these restricted view seats. Oh my God! I'm gonna really miss this place.
I think a friend of the pod, Chad Graff, won't be sad when they leave there.
No, yeah. Well, I didn't either. I think even Minnesota's most famous Islanders fan, Michael Russo himself, will probably not be very upset when they leave that building, as will the rest of hockey everywhere. Because just like
it'll be interesting to see where they go. 'Cause they could potentially go back out to
Long Island,
Nassau Coliseum and the renovated Nassau Coliseum, or you've got Hartford just throwing out letters to the Islanders saying, "Hey, check us out."
Yeah,
even though they have a lousy arena situation, but
that's like an open letter on the internet.
Yeah,
there's just like you're just doing it for yourself, Like there's nobody's gonna really take it seriously. You're just, it is what it is. Like you're like, hey, we would like a hockey team, and the rest of the world's like, yeah, cool, great. Now what?
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
but no, I think the most sense is made is going back to Long Island. It just makes too much sense. They're the Islanders. They're not the Brooklyners. Just go back to Nassau. They've got it renovated. It's probably beautiful now. Probably has luxury boxes or whatever the hell they were missing there that they needed to move for. They can just pretend that they left so they could do the renovations. Like the season the Vikings played at TCF, or the 2 seasons Vikings played at TCF. Just pretend like that, like
just
that.
Pretend it didn't happen.
Right. Just pretend like it was a temporary move, and it was only ever supposed to be a temporary move, even though you very much moved with it being permanent in mind.
All right. So back to the Red Wings game. Late in the first period. Oh, they're playing Pitbull now at Barclays.
Oh.
That's good.
Better tweet Nate Wells.
Yeah, I got to hold a microphone, so I can't do it. Nate'll
he'll catch
Nate'll let
somehow.
me know tomorrow when he listens.
He will. Yeah.
But no, late in the first period, in the corner of I think it was the offensive zone.
Yeah. Well, it was the Wild's defensive zone.
Okay, so they're in the corner, and Jared Spurgeon gives a cross check to Gus Nyquist, and then Nyquist goes down, and he instantly gets back on his feet, and then he turns around and proceeds to just straight spear Spurgeon right in the face, just a few inches below the eye, which I don't like to say things are pretty intentional, but I said this, or I tweeted it, I should say. That was probably the most blatant high stick I've ever seen in my life. And I've watched a fair amount of hockey in my time.
Everyone kind of flipped their lids when Jeff Blashill said that it wasn't intentional after they came back from that intermission.
He said that?
Yeah, you didn't catch that?
No.
So Pierre goes to him and he goes, Jeff Blashill, blah, blah, I'm a bald idiot. Everyone's going to talk about this hit on, this high stick, and what was your take on it? And Blashill goes, well, I've known Gus Nyquist for a long time, and I can very much say that it wasn't intentional. And, obviously everyone just instantly roasted him on Twitter, which they should have. But I get what he was, I think, getting at. And we don't know Gustav Nyquist to be a dirty player. He's not Matt Cook. He's not Cody McLeod. He's not insert other Avs player here. He's not, he's not any one of the Rutus.
I haven't heard of the Rutus in a while.
Anyway, so, I don't think he's a dirty player, and I don't know that this particular action makes him a dirty player. But, you saw the play. There is absolutely zero denying that this was very much intentional. And so I think Blashill was just obviously sticking up for his guy and maybe slightly misquoted in that, he didn't think that that Nyquist was trying to very much hurt Jared Spurgeon. It was just one of those things. You stub your toe and you scream, or you stub your toe and you punch a hole in a wall or something to that effect. It doesn't mean that you were a raging psychopath. Like you lost your temper for a very slight moment. It did something very regrettable, and that's obviously what happened with Nyquist. That being said, it was heinously undercalled by the referees, right. And I guess the happy ending is that he's going to hear from the the Department
Right.
of Player Safety, and obviously, I would be surprised if there isn't at least a minimal suspension handed down because first time offender or not, I mean that was an absolutely heinous. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen. I don't know. I guess I haven't really paid super close attention, and maybe someone else can point out something different. But have you seen something so obviously, so blatantly malicious? I mean, the last thing that comes to mind for me is like, I don't know. The Duncan Keith slash on Charlie Coyle was brought up. That's a pretty obvious one. I don't know if it's getting to Todd Bertuzzi, Steve Moore level, but that's something that comes to mind in a very blatant, very careless act. So yeah, it was a one-off deal, and obviously the biggest concern for me is how the refs called it. I mean, because if he didn't draw blood from Jared Spurgeon, there was no doubt about it. They were only going to give him 2 minutes on that.
Right.
And it's just like, are you insane? Like, what does it take to get a game misconduct if that doesn't get a game misconduct? Like, that's the part that everyone should be focusing on, and I think a lot of people are. But it's just like, come on. I mean, to bring up our friend Mike Milbury, he read the riot act in the first intermission, and when that guy is right on something, it's plain as day. Yeah.
Nyquist only got 4 minutes, and then 2 of which got negated by Stewart on a roughing minor for kind of coming in and
ridiculous.
Kind of retaliating, if you will. But and after the game, Nyquist said, it wasn't intentional and yada yada yada. But I don't know, it just came through a little bit ago that the Department of Player Safety has offered him an in-person hearing, which means they can suspend him more than 5 games. So we'll see what comes of that.
I don't know that he's going to get 5. I mean, he should ideally, because you really want to take plays like that out of the game. But given his relatively clean track record and general standing in the NHL, he'll get, 2 games. I'd say 3 tops, which, it was a one-time deal. It's a one-off thing, and it's obviously just a momentary lapse in judgment in his part, and I don't know. I don't. Obviously, the Wild got very fortunate that it didn't injure Jared Spurgeon further than it did, but I don't know. If they give him 2 or 3 games, I guess I just have to kind of be content with it because I guess at that point it just kind of is what it is.
Well, I think I've mentioned this before, but I have turned off emotions when it comes to the Department of Player Safety.
That's a very smart idea.
Right, as most people should.
Yeah.
And I think we touched on this in our What's Wrong with the NHL show.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll be surprised if, it's something, they offer a fair suspension, but, whatever.
Well, luckily for vengeance-seeking Wild fans, he's not a superstar. So there is that. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not, he's not an all-star.
And I guess more fortunately was Spurgeon got a couple of stitches and it only took just a couple of minutes, and he was back out there on the ice and, missed very, very little time. So, good on him, and I guess impressively, that's, just a couple minutes to get some stitches below the eye. That's, that's good on the Wild training staff.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you can do that quickly, but
I wouldn't even stop crying that soon, let alone, have regained my composure enough to get some stitches in the locker room.
Yeah, needles and I don't do well. So good. I'm trying to look up what his time on ice was. The total was 22-16.
Jeez,
so
it's not bad.
Didn't miss a whole lot, but
which is very important in a game where the Wild are without Dumba and still without Brodin to this point. So, I mean, Spurgeon...
Suter only played 26, so
right.
That was really surprising with no Brodin and no Dumba.
I mean, you see Spurgeon get basically like kebabbed by somebody's hockey stick, and, it's kind of scary because you've already lost 2 of your top 4 defensemen. I mean, Brodin and Dumba were your second pair for majority of the season so far, and obviously Brodin's been out a solid 12 plus games right now, and Dumba just went down the other night. So it's like that's kind of a really scary thing, and if anything's going to derail this team, as our friend Tony Abbott at Hockey Wilderness mentioned, if anything's going to derail this team, it's going to be losing 3 out of your 4 top defenders. I mean, that's a pretty good way to sink your season. So obviously very, very good news that it was just a surface scar to Brodin, or I mean to Spurge, and hopefully Brodin, they say, is coming back soon, and Dumba's injury doesn't sound super serious, so hopefully they can get back healthy for the hellacious stretch that they're going to face come March.
Right. So and the Wild, they cleaned it up pretty good in the third, to kind of put Detroit away, and that is one game I've seen, but Curl, the goalie for Detroit, was not good. And perhaps the best example was I think it was the second Parise goal, where he miffed the puck behind the net, and then he just ended up just falling over right on the side of the net, and then he just sat there.
He did. He just.
I mean, I don't fault him. He's just like, well, this play is over.
Yeah.
That's a goal. So I'm not going to flail to try and stop.
Right.
But
he's not going to do the Goldberg dive in front of the net.
That was every Goldberg save was dead dive.
That's the joke. Kemper did that earlier this year, where he was caught way out of position, and he was at the top of the crease, and then just basically didn't even move his legs at all, just dove with his upper body with his arms extended. It's what are you doing?
Greg Goldberg had one save in the Mighty Ducks that he actually should have made, and it was in the title game in the first movie, and Bombay was so impressed he had to yell, "Big save, Goldberg."
I don't think we need to talk about Greg Goldberg's statistics because I don't think they're very good.
I can put on D2 right now. I know it's on Netflix.
Tremendous. And then obviously the Folin goal. Woof. That Folin goal was ugly. And good for Christian Folin, I mean, to tally a goal, because he's been in and out of the lineup, and he's been a very regular press box member. But, good for him to score that. But, man, I mean, that doesn't get much more of a sharp angle, and it's not like that shot was anything to write home about. So that was pretty nasty. But, hey, I wrote about it earlier this year on the now-defunct Wild Extra about how the Wild really got owned by backup goaltenders last year. I mean, backup goaltenders last season, I believe, I did the math, and I think they were a .935 save percentage or something absurd like that. I mean, it was really, genuinely, concerning and or repulsive how bad they were against backup goaltenders.
It was bad, and I actually noted that I mentioned that to my friends, and I was like, if this was last year, this guy would have pitched a shutout. They're only allowed one goal, and we would have lost.
He would have been standing on his head.
That's how this team plays. Backup goalies or AHL goalies, they always make them look like the greatest thing. And as you said, you pointed it out, and just an absurd number for save percentage.
Right. And I'll probably do something similar, that probably be a good off-season piece. But at the end of this season, I mean, they have absolutely feasted on backup goaltenders this year. And this was no exception. And so that's been one of the many things that you can kind of point to. I mean, obviously, guys having great years and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, backup goalies literally had a Vezina-level save percentage against this team last year. And this year, the Wild are absolutely taking them to town. And which you should, which is, what makes a hell of a lot more sense. And that's how you're given a victory by the Red Wings. The Red Wings are saying, hey, it's a back-to-back, take on our backup goalie. We've got, Mrazek hurt right now. Here's our backup goaltender. Right. Enjoy,
And they lost last night
giving up
to Columbus.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, it's a tough back-to-back for them.
Not a pretty set of back-to-backs, and
well, they're just kind of bad in general this year. So.
Not a good weekend for Detroit in general.
No, the passing of Mike Ilitch, obviously a rough go for the Detroit faithful.
Right. I don't really have a Mike Ilitch story, but just kind of from afar, he just seems like the kind of owner who is very all in on his teams, the Red Wings and the Tigers, and you can't ask for much more than that from an owner, which is kind of what we see out of Craig Leopold.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, we need to spend this to get a coach or a player, and fine, I'm all in. If it makes us better, have at it." But
yeah, and it's really, really, really easy to make every sports owner seem like the Snidely Whiplash of every situation. And obviously people can whine about, the new Red Wings stadium getting public funding or whatever. Every stadium that's been built in the last 40 years, except for Yankee Stadium, has been half public money. So I'm not mad at Mike Ilitch for that, but yeah, like you said, he seems like the owner where it's like you're really glad that he owns the team that you're a fan of. I mean, he's like the anti-Carl Pohlad. Right. He is like Craig Leopold, where it's just like he'll spend it. He doesn't care. Right. He was committed to winning, and
he's not going to pinch pennies.
Right, and to his point, and I hate to agree with Gary Bettman on anything, but he really was a champion he was a champion of Detroit, and Detroit was dying or is dying or whatever. Detroit was in rough shape, and he is very committed to. They've got a new ballpark in town. They've got a new hockey arena in town. They still keep the Pistons in the suburbs, which is probably a good idea. But he's very committed to the revitalization of that city, and that's kind of a tough. It was kind of a tall task, to say, hey, you want to put a gazillion-dollar baseball stadium and a gazillion-dollar hockey arena in downtown Detroit. It just does not sound like a very attractive plan, but he was very committed to that town, and I'm sure there's plenty of negatives you could bring up about the guy, but you have to respect his commitment to his hometown, to his community like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll agree to that. So that can probably wrap it up for looking back at the week. Do you have any other scathing thoughts? Or I think we kind of hit it all.
We've done a lot. We've recapped the week, and it's taken almost an hour. So
we really did have a lot.
Probably
to say.
Probably go a little on the short side for the preview week.
We're going to kind of roll through the preview here, but looking ahead, the Wild play Anaheim, the Mighty Ducks on Tuesday, Valentine's Day. And then they play Thursday, Dallas, and then Saturday, Nashville. All home games as the Wild continue on their 8-game homestand. And these are somewhat big games. You've got in conference, in division opponents, and you've got a day off in between every game. So certainly. You'd like to see the Wild come away with at least 4 points out of the week as usual, and they'll probably find a way to do that. And Nashville has kind of gotten it together, but it's still not really. Although they did just turn the table on the Stars tonight after falling behind 3-0. They won 6-3. So that's
I think that says more about the Stars than it does about the Preds.
It's just the continued Stars throwing out 6 guys who don't understand how to play defense.
Yeah.
So you like to think the Wild can win against Dallas and Anaheim not having a good stretch lately. They've lost 6 out of their last 10. So you'd like to think that they can get a win there, and then see what happens with Nashville. But I don't know, kind of a nice week ahead. But it sounds like we'll get we're close to having Jonas Brodin come back at some point, maybe this week. If not, then maybe right out of that bye week that follows. This week, and then hopefully we'll see Matt Dumba check back in at some point.
Yep,
because I'm not too optimistic about throwing out Folin, Prosser, and Olofsson again for many nights.
Yeah. That's. I mean, we've seen some good play out of those guys, and we've also seen some kind of bad play out of those guys. And I think with Prosser, you kind of get what you're getting more or less. But and he hasn't been awful. To his credit, he's been a little better this season. But Olofsson and Folin, there's going to be some growing pains. I mean, you don't want those. It is nice to not have to throw both of those guys in lineup at once. I mean, if you kind of saddle one next to Prosser, you hope that they just kind of hold their heads above water a little bit, and that's kind of what you've got out of either one of those kids. Same thing goes for Riley, I suppose. Same kind of idea. But you really don't want a situation where all three of those guys are in the lineup, including Prosser. So hopefully we get those defensemen back healthy soon, and hopefully there's a whole lot of derailment as far as the season goes with those two hurt defensemen.
As we go into the week, the Wild are currently at 80 points on the season at 55 games, and as somebody pointed out earlier, they had 87 all of last season.
Yeah.
And they're 5 points up on Chicago, and the Wild have played 2 fewer games. So, you'd like to see that lead continue to get bigger here as the bye weeks start to come into play.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they could potentially by the middle of next week have as many points this season as they had all of last season, and then that's crazy. 2 months left in the season essentially, and they could have the same amount of points.
Yeah, that's nuts. All right, I'm gonna get to some Q&A here. It was
sure.
Was minimal again. We had a few late entries here.
Sure.
Our friend Brian Reynolds wants to know why we limit the questions to just Wild, and maybe we should just open the floor to anything because the questions kind of go down in volume when we just limit it to Wild.
See, and I think the thing with that is that we talk Wild, we cover everything there is to cover. Because we're such such brilliant hockey writers. That too, yeah. I talk so damn much that we answer everything there is to answer during the show. So people want to
people just assume we're going to hit everything.
so what the people want to know is, I mean, they hold us in such high regard. They want to know what our thoughts are and everything else. And
they need our food takes.
Most of the time, that's food. Yeah, most of the time it's food. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe we'll open it up.
As I replied to him, I said food questions cause a lot of tension on this podcast. So,
what I think as a whole, me and you don't have a whole lot of tension as it is because we're both relatively laid back guys. So it wouldn't kill us to have a disagreement once in a while.
We fight about soup or wrestling and soccer on Twitter.
One of these days, we're just going to have a tag team match. Just me and Panda, you and Dan, and we're just gonna go at it.
Yeah. Boy, team chemistry with Dan at an all-time high. Anyway, and again, Aaron Berger wanted to know why no food questions. So he just offered up a comment of, I ate soup Saturday night and was full as expected.
Okay, well, I've mentioned this before. I can eat an entire bag of Doritos and fill myself up. It does not make an entire bag of Doritos meal-worthy. I can eat hors d'oeuvres to the point where I'm sick with indigestion. It's not the point. Moving on.
All right. So the one question we have here is from Ethan Hoffland. I think I got Hoffland.
Sure.
My contacts are spitting out here, so reading the computer is getting difficult. But what's your panic level with Eric Staal? We kind of hit on that earlier. It's concerning, but if it continues on, sure. And maybe that's a reason why Boudreau has kind of been juggling the lines here, is to try to get Staal going.
Yeah.
But I'm not that concerned. Like I said, that the other guys at center have covered up for him, which is the beauty of having good depth at center. as everybody else has been able to kind of contribute and cover up for, Staal not being able to continue on with his point total. So I'm not that worried.
Yeah, I'm not either. And like I said, I've been a big fan of Eric Staal all season long. And even though I've been of the expose him crowd, I've been a huge fan of his and a huge fan of what he's brought to this team and the way that the lines kind of slot out with him being here. So, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried about him. And even if, as it helps a lot that the Koivu Zucker Granlund line is absolutely otherworldly right now. And basically, not to say that Staal is holding anybody back, but it seems like Nino, and it seems like Coyle, and it seems like the other guys on the team are still finding adequate amounts of success, even with him scuffling. So I'm not terribly worried about it. To kind of put a cap on it.
Yeah. Well, that was it. That was the questions for the week here. So,
jeez,
not a whole lot. I don't know. We also didn't know we were doing Q&A until kind of in the afternoon. True. So we could have given a lot more time. Yeah. But we had to make some changes here at the last minute. So
shifting on the fly.
Yeah. All right. Jersey of the week.
Sure.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
Do people even know who we are?
No, as you heard that little transition clip, I remember that I did not cover introductions again. I think it's getting worse every week.
It is.
I think when I make my podcast notes, I think I have to put at the top of the page in giant font and bold and whatnot introductions. But for the sake of whatever, I'm Giles. That's Ben over on the other side of the table. And then this is, for our new listeners, this is the part of the week where we kind of look at each team and we imagine what their jerseys are going to look like next year in the Adidas redesign. Mm-hmm. We've had some good ones here the last few weeks.
Yeah,
where we've kind of had decent discussion. But this week is Detroit.
Yeah.
So discussion's going to be pretty minimal here.
Yeah.
I think we're both of the same mindset. These guys have had jerseys for the same jerseys literally for at least like half a decade. Yeah. They're not going to change up. They're the quote original six that everyone loves to gush over, because you really can't say that phrase enough. And especially for this Montreal-Boston game. I caught a little bit of the pregame at a friend's place, and I don't think I heard, original six enough in the 10 minutes I saw. Roughly about 10 times.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. But anyway, they're not going to change. They're going to just continue on with their look, and it is a good traditional look. So
yeah. It'll be interesting because, I don't know. So here, I'll pose it like this, because this has been kind of the running thing all season, where basically like the original six teams and then the teams, basically the class of 67 and the original six, have all kind of stuck with their jerseys for the most part, or they've gone back and forth like the Penguins did kind of. But we want them to stay the same because they're all good. Every other team, all the expansion teams basically since 67, haven't had the same consistent identity, except for maybe the Sharks, I guess, and some other teams I can't think of. But, so with that in mind, you've got the original six. None of them are going to change their jerseys, especially Montreal, or Toronto just did, which was kind of a huge deal. So of those six teams, what do you think as far as who is the most likely to change anything major, or who should change anything major?
because the original 6 is, I want to make sure I have all the teams right. We got Montreal, Boston, the Rangers,
Yep.
the Leafs,
Yep. Chicago, Detroit.
Chicago, and Detroit. If there was a team that, kind of had a drastic change, I'd say Boston.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would go with something of a more throwback look and maybe incorporate, the Adidas look in there, but I can't see any of these other teams making a huge switch, except for maybe Boston, because they've kind of gotten away from their good look of the 70s and 80s.
Well, I feel like they've tampered with the rest of their jersey the most of all the original
Right.
6 teams. They've never really messed with their logo. They've introduced third logos, whatever. Everyone's done that pretty much. But as far as their striping pattern goes, the rest of their jersey goes, they felt like they've tampered the most.
Yeah.
Whereas Detroit probably the least. Montreal not very much at all, and Chicago not very much at all, and the Rangers not really much at all. So, Toronto kind of tinkered quite a bit with their jerseys too. They've had a lot of different striping patterns, and Boston a lot of different striping patterns. So, yeah, I'm going to tend to agree with you on that. The one thing that I did throw out, I guess we talked about the Rangers along a couple of weeks ago, and I did throw it. I would love to see the return of any variation of the Liberty jersey, just because I'm a child of the 90s and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, not enough Liberty jerseys.
Right, but I will agree with you when you say that's one of the most beautiful jerseys in the NHL, and I do absolutely agree with that. I think the simplicity of just the diagonal word mark is just it's obviously been very much copied across hockey, and for a good reason, because it's a great look. So I'm going to go with you on that. I think that obviously Toronto's not changing much. I don't think Chicago should. I think they're underrated as far as their look goes. But yeah, Boston. Looking at we're looking at them right now playing. I'm not all that enamored with their jerseys, aside from that classic logo. It's just kind of they could go with something a lot more simple, something a lot more classic, and I would like to see that versus sticking with what they have, which is kind of a modern design with their classic logo on it. And of course, we're going to see 3 stripes at the sides, so you got to add that in there too.
Yeah. All right. That can probably wrap it up for us.
Sure.
I'll try and work on introductions for next week. But yeah, you can find Ben and I on coldomaha.com, writing once a week. Check that out, because we have wild content coming up every day of the week.
Yeah.
So check that out. You can find us arguing about non-relevant things on Twitters at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. You can follow our podcast on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast, where we throw out those Q&As. So, yeah. And then if you listen to us on iTunes, toss us a rating on there. Or if you follow us on Stitcher, or listen to us on Stitcher, do that as well. But otherwise, that'll wrap it up for us. I'm not sure if we'll have a guest on next week. We'll kind of work on that, since we had to have a reschedule here this week. But we'll be back regular time again next week. So any scathing final thoughts?
I don't know. For some reason, I just thought about either saying something political or mentioning the fact that we're not very political, which is topical for Wild Podcast this past week. But it is what it is, I guess.
Well, I'm out of beer, so I'm not ready to talk politics yet.
I'm never ready to talk politics, along the same lines.
It is still ridiculous how our most listened to day on this podcast came the day after the election. So
yeah, I thought it was hilarious that's the case because it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it was a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. They had to turn to us for entertainment.
Right, and you're just kind of looking for an escape, and I'm really glad that because that means that many people see us as a worthwhile escape, and it just so happens that we recorded a new podcast on election night, so it was very fresh and new, and no, it was very, in a weird way, it made me very proud that people came to us for that kind of solace on what was a very difficult day. Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back next week, but we better get out of here before Dan shows up and starts talking about things people don't want to listen to. So, all right. We'll see you next week.
Later.
St. Paul, Minnesota. Minneapolis, Minnesota.
We are ducks, and ducks fly together.